Hey, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing well. Today I thought we would go over just who Megan is and how we met and some frequently asked questions that we get. So we'll just dive right into it. The first question is, how did you meet?
At church. We met at church.
We met at church, yeah. So I was kind of considering joining the ward, the mid-single adult ward, and saw that they had a volleyball activity. And so I was like, I'll check it out. I didn't expect there to be like amazing volleyball. Obviously, if there was, that would have been great. But I just wanted to go see what it was like, and that's where we first met.
Yeah. And that was really good for me to meet, I think, have that first impression of him. Because I also like volleyball, and I like volleyball players, and I like kind volleyball players. And
Thanks. That's so sweet. No, yeah, volleyball is a big part of both of our lives. We've come to learn, and so I've always had like a dotted checkbox. I think of like be able to play volleyball.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, like it wasn't a must-have, but it was definitely something that I value a lot. And so yeah, she's a great setter and great vibe on the court. So always fun to play with.
Yeah, whereas mine, I'm finding that it wasn't just a dotted box. It was like an outline folded box.
Oh, really?
And yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I think so. Volleyball's a huge part of our family's life and my life, so that's a good thing. Yeah.
Cool. The next question is, how did you know that he or she is the one? I don't know if this is helpful, but in my last video I said I don't love going to museums, and that's usually because I just go through them pretty quick. I just see the art and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I don't take the time to really look unless it catches my eye and I'm like, whoa, and I'm super focused on it for a few moments where I really pay attention to the detail and kind of notice how it makes me feel. But otherwise, I just kind of go from art to art and I don't pay much attention to it. And I feel like that's actually very similar to why I was so quickly drawn to Megan. So the first volleyball night was a year ago, almost to the date. Right?
About.
Yeah. But it wasn't until about 2 months ago that I had the thought of like, actually Megan's the person who checks all of those boxes. And then I was like, what does this mean? And then I thought about it, and the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. And so I feel like it was like with art at the museum. It was just like, she's the one, and I love everything about it, and she's the one.
Did you know that's how I also museums?
Do you really?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I walk through, and unless something like captures me, I'm just like, oh, that's nice, that's nice, and then
you like really focus in on it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Wow, that's cool. Wait. But do you like going to museums? Because I just kind of don't.
I can appreciate it if the opportunity presents itself, but I don't plan an itinerary around going to museums.
Okay, because that's how I was with the Japan trip. Cool. Okay, the next question is, what's a funny moment?
Do you want me to tell how I know you're the one?
oh, sorry. Sorry, proceed. When you're ready, so sorry. This is the first time. It's the first time we're recording with someone else, so it's always like my perspective. So sorry.
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't think I had a singular experience. It wasn't one moment. I think it was a collection of a few moments, and 3 in particular that I've recognized that I think helped me be able to recognize this opportunity for what it was. The first one goes back to last summer. I had the chance to spend my entire summer with my baby brother and his sweet family and their new baby, and I think that environment gave me a space to hear the voice of God and him tell me, okay, this next season in your life, Megs, is to start your own family. So I already came into 2024 knowing that that's what my intent was, to start my own family. So that was the first experience. The second experience was February, right before we had our conversation, our chat, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I recently changed positions at work. I moved to a new department, and that transition has been a fabulous personal development opportunity.
Yeah.
It is demanding all the strengths that I do not yet possess, and so each month I participate in a religious fast. And so that's where I go without physical sustenance with the intent for it to be replaced with spiritual strength, power, direction. And so as I was approaching the month of March, I thought, you know what, I'm going to fast about developing these professional weaknesses. And I found myself in that prayer letting God know what my intent was, including that I would be able to recognize the doors that He was leading me to. At the time, I thought it was professional doors, but a few days later, God was like, this is the door.
Yeah.
It was kind of intense.
It was intense.
Mm-hmm.
That was the second one?
Yeah.
What's the third one?
So the third one, so I think I got to that place where I was like, oh, this is who God has led me to. The third one was more confirmation to me that once I walked through that door and committed to it, which may require a little bit of contextual explanation. And this is specific to our religious beliefs. So there's something called a patriarchal blessing, and that's a special prayer that's offered on behalf of an individual. And it includes promises and blessings that God has for that individual.
Like personal, like
specific to, in this case, to me. And then the second thing is priesthood holder. How would you, what is a priesthood holder, Jonathan?
Well, no, what is a priesthood holder? Somebody who is given somebody who's given God's authority to perform things.
Sure. Like act on
to
his
administer,
behalf,
to
sure.
administer in like the administrative things
Yeah.
of the church or the gospel.
Yeah. So I received my patriarchal blessing when I was a teenager, when I was 16, and included in this blessing, in this prayer, was also direction regarding my future husband. And so I've tried to use that as a gauge, as guardrails throughout my life, as compass throughout my life. And it got to a point a few years ago where the prospect was not a priesthood holder, and so I had to do some figuring out of what I if I wanted to follow this prayer that had these promised blessings, or if I wasn't going to. And I ultimately decided to follow the guidance that I found in that prayer. But that didn't come without doubt and did I understand that correctly?
Right.
Did I apply that correctly? Was this a missed opportunity? Did I misinterpret it? Until Jonathan, it was a really, the first few days once we decided to do this there was a lot of things for me to process and unearth and evaluate and deconstruct, and it was pretty taxing.
Yeah.
And so my best friend had suggested, hey Megs, have you gotten a priesthood blessing or this special blessing to offer comfort, relief? And so I was like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So I reached out to my brother who lives just about 15 minutes away, and he said he is a priesthood holder. And he said, I got you, Megs, but do you want to ask Jonathan to offer this? And I was like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So I texted him, and he was gracious as always. Yeah, sure, for sure, absolutely. But I think this final third experience that I had was when I walked into his house, and he was coming down the stairs, freshly showered, with a white shirt, tie, and he had sacred hymns playing in the background. And how you approach that, it doesn't really matter. But to me, it showed his intentionality and the reverence that he approaches that opportunity and that responsibility with. And so that for me was this is what God was talking about in that blessing that I received when I was a teenager about having a worthy priesthood holder. I was like, okay, this is it.
Oh,
that's where I was.
That's so sweet. Thank you. There's some other things that I wanted to say too. So let's see. One of our early interactions was at a party that I host. I used to. Well, I still. So on this channel, I've mentioned that I host parties and stuff. Megan was there for one of them, and there, and then at different dinners that we've had, just with small groups, I had this really distinct impression from Megan that when she talks to people and she listens to them and asks questions and is genuinely interested in them as a person, I just get the sense that Megan really treats other people and her time with them as something very sacred. And that was something that was super impressive to me because I value people and I value their experiences, and I saw that Megan, she's like on a whole nother level. Like it's a sacred there's the sacredness and respect and dignity that she brings to the conversation and that she brings out in the other person that I was just super impressed by. So that was that's really one, like, because in the parties that I host, I like send out little bios, and that was what I said about Meagan in the little guest bio about her. So that was one thing. The other thing is that the third thing I would say is that I learned to cook a dish called kimchi jjigae. It's like kimchi stew, and there were just times where I was like, "Oh, I want to make this because it's my favorite. It's my favorite dish, and I want to eat it with people." And whenever I asked her if she wanted some, she always said yes. And so I was
absolutely, who wouldn't?
that's why I was always like, "Oh, it's so nice to have somebody to like cook
all
for."
the time, anytime.
It's like cook for and have great conversation and just love spending time with, and I just feel replenished when I'm around you. So then when the thought came into my mind of like, oh, not only does she check all of the boxes of like things that I value, I also just genuinely love spending time with her and like exploring the world with her.
Yeah, agreed. And that's actually a text conversation that we had the week that we decided that we were going to get married. We actually were going to see each other quite a bit, because we would see each other, I don't know,
like once a month.
Yeah,
once every
like
few
on
months.
our own. We'd see each other at church, sometimes a couple times a month, but that one, it was like boom, 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 boom. And so he was so thoughtful, and he had messaged me and he said, "Oh, we're kind of seeing each other a lot. Are you okay with that?" And knee-jerk reaction was like, absolutely. Like when I spent time with him, it's always replenishing. And so I think I might have said like, I could spend time, I could see you every day and I'd be fine with it.
So I actually took that as a green light to be like, okay, because when I sent the text, I was already, I had the thought, already, but then it was like, okay, there's some mutual like feeling of this, like we both feel really good about it. So
certainly a replenishing dynamic that I think is essential.
Oh, totally.
For us, especially though, as individuals and our personality types and stuff like that. So
let's see. One last thing that I might add is so let's see. Do we have, because we don't really get into this. How are we on time? We're good. Yeah. So one other thing that I would say is that there was a night that I was like, okay, I'm gonna ask her if she is open to this idea, and then we processed it and we had some tough, like some really raw and vulnerable conversations. And even though I was already like set on, okay, like if she's in, then I'm in, but those conversations are really what made me realize, okay, like we can do this.
Oh, really?
Because we can have these really tough conversations,
I see, yeah.
and there's respect, and there's room for, being vulnerable, there's safety being vulnerable, and there's like we're willing to see each other in that vulnerability. And so I was like, okay, I'm totally all in this. And then adding on top of that just the spiritual side of things and how I really feel like God has led us to this relationship.
Agreed, 1,000%. And the kimchi jjigae.
Amazing. Okay, the next question is, what is a funny memory you have while dating? Oh no. Can I go first, please? Okay, so with every couple, I think we're trying our best to make the best impression possible on our in-laws, our potential and future in-laws. And so at some point I got her dad and mom's phone number, and I texted them and I was like, oh yeah, so we had just met, we had a phone call and got to know each other just very briefly. And with having met each other briefly on the video call, we had like, I wanted to open up channels of communication in case they wanted to ask me anything or whatever. And so I texted them and I'm like, hey brother and sister Walker, so great to meet you, and reach out if you have any questions. So, super happy to get to know you better.
My last name is not Walker.
Oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed because later they had texted Meagan and were like, what did they ask? Like,
no, I think Dad called me.
Name? Yeah,
I think Dad called me. So I think Dad called me because you were at volleyball.
Yes.
So my parents live out of state, so I wanted to video call so that they could meet him, and he was so kind and said, hey, let me text them just to open these lines of communication. And then he went out to volleyball, and I get a call from my dad, and he's like, Megs, how is this guy? he wants to marry you, and he doesn't even know you're lost.
Oh my gosh. And that's like that's actually in my social anxiety, whatever. I'm not a socially anxious person generally, but of the things that make me socially anxious, it's calling people the wrong name.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like to the point where I won't say anything.
Oh, no.
Like I'll just pretend like I know their name. That's the worst. And also why I have name tags in all my stuff to like help people with that. But it's like one of my greatest fears to call people their wrong name. And I was like, great. This is great. This is their second interaction with me.
So my dad takes a screenshot of his text message and he sends it to me, and clearly it's still something that makes
It's
us
our little
giggle.
inside joke, yeah. It's good though. It's good. Yeah.
I think that's mutually our funny.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Although I do think that I think you are very funny. But I think one thing that always makes me laugh is when you're cooking. There is not a cooking session that does not include oops or
Oh no.
I should like secretly record you.
That would be hilarious. That'd be hilarious. No, so probably one of the examples, I don't know. I was making kimchi jjigae and I was like pouring out a bag of like shredded nori. And I was just shaking it and like some of it was coming out and I wanted a little bit more, but then this huge clump of it dumps into the pot and I was like, oh no, yeah, so
like
that stuff happens all the time.
Yes.
But fortunately kimchi jjigae is like pretty forgiving. You can't really mess it up.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And his is always so yummy. It always turns out whatever.
They're very gracious about my food.
However he makes it.
Okay, next question is, what do you like about your relationship? We kind of gone over it a little bit, but any other things you wanted to add?
What do I like about my relationship? I think that, let this be your other question.
With the strengths? We can all just merge it.
Merge it, yeah. I think the most important thing that it's not even just a like, it's a need, is our commitment to God.
Yeah.
I think we built our single lives around on a relationship with God. And so because of that, now that he's bringing us together, I think that's like our superpower. Yeah, totally.
Something that I love about our relationship is how much of what we want in our future spouse, how do I say this? Like we want to be able to serve in the church and we want to serve God. Like that's one of our top life priorities. And it's so cool to be aligned with somebody so strongly in this thing that means so much to both of us. And so our daily life in and out of church is just all about serving the people around us, doing what we can, and doing what we feel like God wants us to do, especially if it's to help other people. And that's like the thing that makes me one of the most excited about our relationship. So, yeah. The other thing that we're really looking forward to is, and we'll get to that point someday, is the family that we want to raise and the type of family and the type of setting we want to create for our children. So
yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, we have very specific. We have very specific visions of how the kind of home life we want to create, the kind of family dynamic, the kind of experiences that our children will have in our home with us as their parents, and it's very compatible.
Yeah.
Like very, very, very compatible.
Super compatible.
Yeah.
So that's also something. Other things?
What was the other question?
Discuss strengths in your relationship.
Yeah. I would say I think as a result of our relationship with God and him being our number one priority, he's also helped build communication strengths within us as individuals. So when we come together as a partnership, I think our communication is awesome. Probably one of our greatest strengths.
I would say so.
Greatest strength, because I think any relationship requires communication. I think every marriage demands communication. I appreciate that we have the communication dynamic that we do to tackle the specific, the unique aspects of our relationship, though.
Yeah.
And I think in addition to the communication, there are specific strategies that we've either brought to the table or we've discovered together. Do you want to share any of those?
Yeah, so early on in our relationship when we were still kind of figuring things out, we had this concept of like making deposits into our relationship. And so if during the day we hadn't spent much time together or didn't feel like we had really connected, then we would have a conversation about it and say like, how many deposits do you feel like we made today? Or like, what deposits do we make, and were they enough? And it'd be like, oh, like I didn't feel like we made very big deposits in our relationship today. And then we would do something about it. Like we would spend more time together, we would talk about stuff. And then eventually there came a point where like big things happened that led to big deposits. Like, wow, today was $1 million day deposit. And it was cool. What I loved about those conversations was like, we both felt that way. Like, it was like, she would say, yeah, today was $1 million day. And I was like, yeah, today was totally $1 million day for me too. And so it was cool to like be really intentional and purposeful about how we spent time and whether we were connecting every day. And if we weren't, we would make adjustments. And then what I also thought was cool was seeing that God was making deposits in our little bank account too. So it was cool to be like, not only am I putting in, she's putting in, we're putting in, but God's putting in too.
And the interesting thing that I found though is that our biggest deposits, like those $1 million deposits, actually came at the hand of very hard conversations. It was like all of these huge deposits were because there was something really difficult that we experienced and talked through and talked together, and we realized in that a deeper connection to each other. Which essentially, I feel like those deposits essentially are connections. Like, how deeply do we feel connected to each other? A lot of it comes with just spending time together. I know that quality time is
big one.
Probably my biggest love language. And so being able to spend time with him, but then what really what multiplied those deposits often were those hard conversations that we had to have.
Yeah, so actually, because this channel, I've talked about my hourglass analogy. I feel like that applied to us a lot. Like, we had great conversations, oftentimes triggered by collapses, that were oftentimes triggered by important questions that we had to talk about. And we would have the collapse, but then like in the span of the conversation, we would rebuild even higher than we were before. And so and that's something that usually for me takes time. Like the collapse and the gathering takes time to then build slowly, but for us I felt like we collapsed and built up even higher in the same conversation.
Which I think goes back to the impression that I've had throughout this, that I think he and I have both equally been prepared, not just for marriage, but for each other. Like there's all these things that already are in place so that they just like connect quite quickly. And not to say that everything is going to resolve as quickly as they have, but these, like laying the foundation, I think the preparation beforehand has allowed us to rebuild really effectively and efficiently.
Well, so I guess in my analogy, I think the reason for that is because we have the same values and the same life goals. And so when the collapses happen, we know our end destination's the same. We just maybe have to navigate a little, like if we're trying to get to somewhere, like driving to some destination or flying to Korea, we don't know exactly what cities we're going to be going through, but we know we're going to get to Korea eventually. And so maybe it's a discussion of like, okay, maybe we go through this city or this layover or that layover, but we just know that in the end we're going to get to the same place. And that's where we both want to go.
And I had experiences that I really needed at the beginning to remind me of where that destination is, and that is God. And it's now become like an inside joke, because at the beginning, as I was trying to navigate a lot of my perceptions and expectations of life and marriage and everything like that, I found that if I kept my focus on God, I was good. And there was clarity, there was confidence, there was excitement and enthusiasm. The moment that those sights slipped, that's when I started feeling anxious. And he had brought up the biblical story about one of Jesus's followers, Peter, being invited to walk towards Jesus. And the ironic thing was, that's not the word, but the unique thing about the situation though was that Peter was in the middle of the ocean. And so that invitation to come to Jesus was walking on water. And as long as he kept his sights on Jesus, he was fine. But the moment that his eyes caught sight of the storms and the waves, that's when he started to sink. And so when Jonathan brought that up, I was like, oh yeah, that's so true. So just If you notice that my sides are slipping, just be like, Peter.
I still don't know. I still don't feel super comfortable being like, hey, you need
I
to.
still
Like,
want you to, though.
but
That's
no,
what a companion can do.
But I'm just there to support as long as I need to, and it's never super long.
But it's that final destination of a life with God and with our family. And so going back to that focus point, I think what helps us to rebuild is a good term, rebuild as quickly as we have thus far. And there's a number of other strategies that we've learned that have been helpful, that we've tried to deploy to help manage our energy and making sure that we're both feeling replenished and on the same page. What was the other one that we commonly refer to? Oh, the battery, like our energies. We don't use that one as much.
We don't as much.
Yeah.
But we haven't yet.
Yeah. We also, by nature, we're also introverts. We love people, which I think is a strength of ours. We do love people, but we are just programmed more introvertedly. Yeah. And so being able to help support each other to make sure that we are not depleting our energy.
Yes. That's true. Yeah. So like in certain conversations, we have we have some Korean that I've picked up.
A lot of them.
노란색?
Yeah, but you can't tell them otherwise when we're around them.
We'll edit that out. They'll be like, oh, so you're in the red now, are you? I'm like, yep. Thank you for that reminder. We'll edit that out. Our code words. Oh my goodness, that makes me so embarrassed. I just spilled those out like that. Woo!
So we do have these. We have these code words that we use.
No, we shouldn't say that because we have a way to communicate. Should we even say that? Yeah, we communicate about whether we're feeling low on battery and if we need to, spend time just the two of us or just on our own. And so I just love how we communicate. Yeah,
so I think our communication is probably our greatest strength, which I think is really important for this to be successful. Yeah. But I think it's going to be one of, not just something that will keep us from unnecessary pain, but I think that's what we can assert and leverage in our contributions to our marriage, our family, our community.
Yeah. I'd say our spirituality and like our end spiritual goal is super important. Our communication is important, and just how much we value people and value each other, I think is really special and really the strengths of our relationship. Yeah. And then we're finding that there are some things that we don't super match on, but those are so minor that and so let me give you an example so you're not just wondering what that is. Like I'm a big games player, so I love video games, board games, card games, and those aren't necessarily Megan's favorite activities, but and so that was like, oh, you don't love games, but also I appreciate that Megan's always willing to play games because of the time that she gets to spend with the people we're playing with. And but just like games and maybe like TV shows or like the way we consume media is slightly different, but those are so minor now in comparison to how core and important those other things are.
Which I feel like goes back to those values that we have of whether it's like being able to communicate, so being able to be like, hey, this is how oh, that's another thing we do, companionship inventory. Yeah, that's also another thing that recently
super helpful.
Yeah, just within the last few days, companionship inventory, where if there is a issue that we have, we can bring to the table, which I think goes back to that communication strength. And I think a lot of the things that I value about Jonathan is that he allows for communication to happen. Like you can talk about things, but if you don't create a space where you're listening and it's just share what you need to share. What's that, like, listen with the intent to understand, not to reply. I feel like we really try to give space for each other to just be like, tell me all of your thoughts and your concerns, and then together we can figure out how we can make sure that both feel heard, seen, and their needs are being met as we continue to move forward.
Yeah, so there were some tough conversations that at the beginning of them, it was like, do we want to get into this? It's like, do I want to get vulnerable, basically? It's on both sides, I think. But for me, I'm like, yes, please do, because those are the moments that we get to connect on, and even though it's like, here are like my maybe unprocessed and raw emotions, for us, it's become those moments where we can truly see each other and love each other in those moments and connect and not have to worry about like having everything be totally perfect. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly in those, I feel like it was in those, especially at the beginning, it was those conversations that continue to confirm to me that I really think that I was prepared for and led to Jonathan, because I'm the one that is like, ooh, there's a lot going on here, and can I just like throw this at you completely unprocessed, super raw? And he was like, yeah. And there was one conversation that we had where he said, I don't want you to worry about me just being able to handle it. Like, it's not a matter of me, like, I can take it. Like, this is so important to our connection and continue to build that relationship of safety and trust. And
like I wanted those moments.
yeah, and so that was super helpful for me. It took a few iterations for me. I was like, wait, let me give you this much. Is that okay? And he's like, yep. And I was like,
Yeah.
hey, how about this much? Is that okay? And he's like, yep. And I was like, how about this much? And he's like, yep.
Yeah. So I thought those moments were like those $1 million deposits that we were talking about that were super helpful. And the other kind of phrase that we use with, well, just seeing how much God is in the works of all of this is that we are like connecting the dots. And so like I feel like there are millions of dots in both of our lives, but then as with time and as we get to know each other more, we're seeing that like all these dots are connecting, and it's like, wow, it's incredible.
Yes.
It's really incredible.
Yeah.
So,
That it?
anything else we want to talk about?
I don't think so.
Cool.
Not at this moment.
Cool. Well, so hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of our relationship, what's important to us, and why we're so excited for our marriage next month, which is crazy. But we're I know I couldn't be happier.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And we're just so grateful for all of you and your support and all of your questions and seeking to understand, because it gives us a chance to talk and then build from it. So like every time there are questions, whether it's doubtful questions or just seeking to understand, it just opens an opportunity for us to talk.
Right.
And literally every time, it just gets stronger. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's amazing. So thanks. If you have any other questions, let us know. But otherwise, thanks so much for watching. And we love you and hope that you have a great day.
Bye.
Just